You have been told that the United States controls the skies over the Middle East. You have been told this for decades. You have read it in every major newspaper, heard it from every Pentagon briefing, absorbed it through every primetime news segment that has ever framed American military dominance as a permanent, unchallengeable fact of geopolitical life. The aircraft carrier, the stealth fighter, the AWACS surveillance platform, these are the symbols of an air dominant story that Washington has been narrating since the first Gulf War. And that story, that deeply comfortable, deeply familiar story, has just encountered something it was not prepared for. What I'm looking at right now is a transfer agreement that has been circulating among defense analysts in Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran for the better part of the last several weeks. What it confirms is not a weapons sale. It is not a technology partnership. What it confirms is the operational deployment of the S-600 integrated air defense system on Iranian soil, a platform so advanced that even senior NATO planners, speaking privately to journalists at Defense News and Breaking Defense, have described it as a generational leap beyond anything currently fielded in the region. Not an incremental upgrade, a generational leap. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly what this system is, why its deployment changes the strategic calculus over the entire region, what it means for every American base, every American aircraft, and every American carrier group currently operating within 3,000 kilometers of Iranian airspace. And I am going to explain why the mainstream conversation about this development has fundamentally missed the point. This is not a story about Iran getting a better missile battery. This is a story about the end of an era and the beginning of something the region has never seen before. Stay with me because this is where the analysis starts. To understand why the S-600 changes everything, you need to understand what air superiority actually means in the context of modern warfare and why the Middle East has been the laboratory for American air power doctrine for the last 35 years. The United States Air Force and the United States Navy have built their entire strategic posture in the Middle East around one foundational assumption: that they can operate aircraft in contested airspace with acceptable risk. Not zero risk. Acceptable risk. The difference matters enormously. When Pentagon planners calculate mission viability, they run what are called survivability models, probability assessments that weigh a given aircraft against a given air defense system and produce a loss rate estimate. If the estimated loss rate is below a certain threshold, the mission is considered executable. Above that threshold, the mission requires either suppression of enemy air defenses first, what the military calls SEAD operations, or it does not fly at all. For decades, the air defense systems fielded by Iran, Syria, and other regional actors have produced loss rates that American planners considered manageable. The S-300, which Iran received from Russia in 2016, significantly raised the risk calculation, but American analysts, including the Congressional Research Service, in a 2019 assessment concluded that the S-300, while capable, remained within the envelope of what U.S. electronic warfare and stealth capabilities could navigate with sophisticated mission planning. That assessment drove years of operational doctrine. The S-600 is a categorically different problem. The system, known in Russian military classification as the S-600 Triumphator M, is the direct successor to the S-500 Prometheus platform that Russia began deploying domestically in 2021. According to reporting by Jane's Defense Weekly, and confirmed by analysis from the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London, the S-600 integrates three capabilities that previous systems addressed separately. It provides simultaneous engagement of hypersonic ballistic targets at ranges exceeding 400 kilometers. It incorporates next-generation active phased array radar that operates across multiple frequency bands simultaneously, making traditional electronic jamming dramatically less effective. And it carries an anti-stealth detection suite that uses low-frequency radar combined with passive infrared tracking, specifically designed, as Russian military engineers have stated publicly, to detect aircraft with reduced radar cross-sections. To put that last point in plain language, the system was engineered from the ground up to find and engage stealth aircraft. The F-35, the B-2, the platforms that American air power doctrine treats as near invulnerable penetrators against sophisticated defenses. The S-600 was built specifically to challenge that assumption. Subscribe now if you are watching this and realizing that this level of analysis is not reaching you through your normal news sources, because what comes next is even more significant. Announcement number 1. The geographic coverage envelope of the S-600 on Iranian soil redraws the strategic map of the entire region. This is the announcement that matters most, and I want you to understand it precisely because the numbers here are not abstractions. A single S-600 battery operating from a position in western Iran, and we are talking about deployment sites near Hamadan and Isfahan, which have been identified through open-source satellite imagery analysis by researchers at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in California. That single battery projects a hard-kill engagement envelope of between 380 and 420 kilometers. Now take a map, place a compass point on Hamadan, Draw that circle. What falls inside it? Every major American airbase in Iraq falls inside it. Al-Assad Air Base, Erbil International. Every installation American forces have used as a staging platform for operations across the region. Every one of them sits within potential engagement range of a system that, according to former U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff General David Goldfein, speaking to the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies in 2023, represents a class of threat that requires fundamental reassessment of our penetration assumptions. Draw the circle further. The United States Navy operates carrier strike groups in the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. The standard operating position for a carrier group conducting flight operations places it at distances between 200 and 350 kilometers from the Iranian coastline. Every aircraft launched from those carriers, F/A 18 Super Hornets, EA 18G Growlers used for electronic warfare, the E-2D Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft that the carrier group depends on to see the battlefield, Alphamthi, Anithi, and all of them operate well within the free 600 engagement envelope before they have even crossed into Iranian airspace. And this is before we discuss the radar detection range, which extends significantly beyond the engagement range. According to analysis published by the Royal United Services Institute in London, the S-600's primary surveillance radar can track air-breathing targets at ranges approaching 600 kilometers. That means Iranian operators can see American aircraft from the moment they depart their bases in Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE. They are watching before the mission even begins. Announcement number 2, the transfer of the S-600 to Iran is not a bilateral event between Russia and Iran. It is the first operational deployment of this system outside Russian territory, and the implications of that fact extend far beyond the Middle East. Stay with me because this is where the narrative changes entirely. Russia has, until now, maintained the S-600 as an exclusively domestic system. When Iran received the S-300 in 2016, there was significant controversy within Russian military circles about the transfer. Senior Russian defense officials, including Deputy Defense Minister Alexander Fomin, acknowledged publicly that the S-300 export was a difficult decision that required careful management of sensitive technology controls. The S-400, which Russia has sold to Turkey and India, involves exported versions with deliberately degraded radar software compared to the domestic variant. The S-600 transfer to Iran, according to reporting by Reuters, based on 3 unnamed Western intelligence officials, cited in April 2026, involves no such degradation. Iran is reportedly receiving the full capability variant, the same system protecting Moscow and St. Petersburg. Think carefully about what this represents. When Russia transfers its most advanced air defense system, in its full domestic configuration, to a regional power that has been under American military pressure for 4 decades, that is not a transaction. That is a strategic declaration. Russia is communicating something to Washington through this transfer that goes beyond anything that could be said in a United Nations Security Council speech or a diplomatic communique. It is saying, the era in which American air power operates in this region without consequence is over. Bloomberg reported in late April 2026 that the transfer prompted an emergency consultation among NATO defense ministers, with one senior European official describing the development as the most significant shift in regional air defense architecture since the end of the Cold War. That official spoke on condition of anonymity. The mainstream coverage lasted approximately 1 news cycle before being buried under domestic political coverage. Announcement number 2. The S-600 transfer has exposed a fracture in the American security architecture in the Middle East that years of sanctions, proxy pressure, and diplomatic isolation failed to create. Balkan tribe and the fracture runs deeper than a single weapon system. Announcement number 3, and this is the one that almost nobody in the mainstream analysis community is connecting correctly. The S-600 does not operate in isolation. It operates as the crown of a layered air defense network that Iran has been systematically building for the better part of 15 years. And when you understand the architecture of that network, the S-600 does not just add capability at the top. It transforms the effectiveness of every system below it. Here is what Iran currently feels beneath the S-600 umbrella, and I want you to hear these numbers carefully. According to the Military Balance 2025, published by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, Iran operates approximately 290 medium and long-range surface-to-air missile systems across its territory, including domestically produced variants of the Bavar 373, which Iranian defense officials have publicly described as equivalent to or exceeding the S-300 in performance against maneuvering targets. Below that layer sit hundreds of shorter-range systems, including the Khordad-15 that Iran used in June 2019 to shoot down a United States Navy RQ-4A Global Hawk drone, a $130 million platform, at an altitude of approximately 19,800 meters over the Strait of Hormuz. these systems individually pose significant challenges. Networked together under the coordination and battle management architecture of the S-600, they become something qualitatively different. The S-600's battle management system, its ability to receive tracks from every radar in the network, fuse that data, and allocate engagements across multiple layers simultaneously, turns what was previously a collection of independent batteries into an integrated kill chain. A target that evades the S-600 at long range does not escape the problem. It is handed off in real time to the next layer of the network. American air power doctrine was designed to fight individual air defense batteries. It was not designed to fight an integrated, networked, multi-layer air defense system with a next-generation battle management brain. Colonel Mike Pietruccia, a former U.S. Air Force electronic warfare officer writing in War on the Rocks, described this problem as early as 2014. He called it the anti-access environment maturation problem. What he was warning about then has now arrived in full form on Iran's Western Plateau. Now let's talk about what is really happening behind the official responses, because there are two stories playing out simultaneously, and the version reaching most audiences covers only one of them. The public story, the one you will find in the wire service reports, and the think tank statements, frames this development as a provocation that will be addressed through appropriate channels. The Pentagon spokesperson told reporters at a briefing in late April that the United States takes note of the reports and is monitoring the situation closely. The State Department said it has conveyed its concerns to relevant parties. The White House called the transfer destabilizing. These are the words of institutions that do not have an answer and are buying time while they find one. Here is the story that is not reaching you. Inside the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy, this development has triggered a planning crisis that career officers are describing in private terms considerably more alarming than anything appearing in official statements. Breaking Defense, citing multiple serving and retired American officers in a piece published in early May 2026, reported that the Joint Staff has ordered a complete reevaluation of existing air tasking order templates for potential operations in the Gulf region. An air tasking order is the master document that coordinates every aircraft, every route, every timing window in a military air operation. Ordering a complete reevaluation means that the existing plans, the plans that American commanders have been training against, refining, and relying on, are no longer viable as written. That is not monitoring the situation closely. That is an operational planning emergency. Consider also what this means for America's regional partners. Israel operates one of the most sophisticated air forces in the world, and Israeli air power has relied for decades on its ability to operate over contested airspace, including in Syria, with relatively low attrition. Israel struck targets inside Iran twice in 2024, in operations that Israeli officials described as demonstrating their freedom of action. With the S-600 operational on Iranian soil, those operations become categorically more dangerous, not impossible, but the risk calculus has shifted substantially. Israeli military planners know this. A senior Israeli defense official, speaking to Haaretz under conditions of anonymity in early May, described the S-600 deployment as the development we have most feared for the last decade. But the Gulf Arab states that host American bases, Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE, are watching this development with a particular kind of anxiety. Their security arrangements with the United States are predicated on the assumption that American air power provides a credible deterrent umbrella. If that umbrella is now penetrated by Iranian air defenses, rather than the other way around, the entire security architecture that Gulf rulers have based their strategic alignment on is suddenly more ambiguous. Saudi Arabia, which has spent the last several years quietly expanding its diplomatic relationship with Iran through the Chinese-brokered Normalization Agreement of 2023, is watching all of this with calculation rather than panic. And that is the most consequential audience in the region for this story. If you live in a country that buys oil priced in dollars, if you pay attention to energy markets, if you operate any kind of business with international supply chains, what is happening in the airspace over Western Iran is not a foreign policy abstraction. It is a story about the structural underpinnings of American strategic influence in the region that has kept energy markets, security arrangements, and dollar-denominated trade flows in their current configuration. When that influence is credibly challenged, the reverberations reach further than most news coverage suggests. This pattern, a rising power deploying asymmetric capabilities to neutralize the military advantage of a dominant power, while a third actor positions itself to benefit from the resulting exhaustion, is not new. History has seen this before, and every time it has repeated, the outcome has followed the same logic. Consider the Peloponnesian War. Athens and Sparta, the two dominant powers of the ancient Greek world, fought each other to mutual exhaustion across 27 years, from 431 to 404 BC. Both had been the anchors of Greek civilization. Both entered the conflict believing that their particular form of military dominance, Athenian naval power, Spartan land power, would prove decisive in short order. Neither was correct. Both were bled over decades. And who emerged from that long, grinding conflict as the dominant power in the Eastern Mediterranean? Not Athens, not Sparta, Macedon, the peripheral rising power that had watched the two established giants exhaust themselves, then stepped into the vacuum. The parallel to the current moment does not require significant translation. The United States is Athens, a naval and air power that has built its regional dominance on the ability to project force from a distance. Iran, hardened by 4 decades of sanctions and military pressure, has developed the asymmetric capabilities of Sparta, land-based, resilient, difficult to decisively defeat. And observing the entire dynamic with strategic patience, deepening its economic relationships, expanding its diplomatic footprint, and notably avoiding the direct military entanglements that would expose it to attrition, sits China. Beijing brokered the Iran-Saudi normalization. Beijing is Iran's largest trading partner. Beijing is the primary market for the Iranian oil that flows regardless of sanctions enforcement, and Beijing has not fired a single shot. The S-600 transfer from Russia adds a new dimension to this parallel. Russia, locked in its own grinding attritional conflict in Ukraine, has made a strategic decision to complicate American options in the Middle East as leverage in its broader confrontation with NATO. It has done so not by deploying Russian forces to the region, but by transferring a capability that forces American military planners to fundamentally recalculate their options. The cost to Russia is one weapons system. The cost to the United States is the validity of decades of operational doctrine. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths forward, because the situation does not permit comfortable ambiguity. Path 1, diplomatic recalibration. The United States, recognizing that its air superiority narrative is no longer credible in its current form, moves to negotiate a new framework with Iran, possibly through back-channel intermediaries, possibly involving Gulf Arab states as facilitators. This path requires Washington to accept something it has resisted for 4 decades, that Iran has earned, through persistence and strategic patience, a degree of regional legitimacy that cannot be bombed, sanctioned, or pressured away. The conditions for this path include a change in the domestic political calculation in Washington, an active Chinese facilitation role, and Iranian confidence that any agreement will be honored. None of those conditions are currently in place, but all of them are theoretically achievable within an 18 to 24-month window. This is the path that produces stability. It is not the path that current Washington political dynamics make easy. Path 2, military escalation, the suppression attempt. Faced with the S-600 deployment, American military planners present options for a preemptive seed campaign designed to degrade or destroy the new system before it becomes fully operational and integrated with Iran's broader air defense network. This path carries risks that dwarf any previous American military operation in the region. A strike on S-600 batteries on Iranian soil is a strike on Russian-supplied, Russian-maintained equipment, with Russian technical personnel almost certainly present during the integration period. The escalatory implications of that scenario extend well beyond the Middle East. The probability of miscalculation is high. The probability of regional escalation into a broader conflict is, in the assessment of analysts at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, significantly elevated under this scenario. Path 3, strategic adaptation, the slow adjustment. This is, I believe, the most likely path, and it is the path that will be least visible in the short-term news cycle. American military planners quietly revise their operational assumptions. Carrier groups are repositioned to greater standoff distances. The mix of platforms deployed to the region shifts toward longer-range strike options and unmanned systems less vulnerable to the S-600's anti-stealth capabilities. American diplomatic activity in the Gulf intensifies not to confront Iran directly, but to shore up the confidence of partners who are quietly reassessing their alignments. No official acknowledgement that the air superiority calculation has changed. No press conference admitting that the regional balance has shifted. Just a slow, mostly invisible restructuring of posture that, over 2 to 3 years, reflects a new strategic reality while the public narrative maintains the language of dominance. I think we are firmly on path 3, with elements of path 1 beginning to develop quietly in the background. The escalation of Path 2 would require a political decision that no administration currently in Washington has demonstrated the appetite to make, given the potential for Russian entanglement. But Path 3 is not stability. It is drift. And drift in a region where Iran, Russia, China, and a collection of increasingly autonomous regional actors are all actively shaping the environment produces outcomes that no one fully controls. Watch the S-600 integration timeline. Watch whether Russia sends additional technical teams to Iran in the next 60 to 90 days. Watch whether Chinese diplomatic activity in the Gulf accelerates. Watch whether there is any quiet American outreach to Iranian interlocutors through Swiss or Omani channels. Those indicators will tell you, with far more honesty than any official statement, which path the situation is actually following. Here are the questions I want you to take away from this analysis. Does the United States have a credible military option in the Gulf region that does not risk escalation to a Russian confrontation? Does the Gulf Arab world continue its current alignment with Washington when the air superiority guarantee becomes visibly questionable? And does China, watching all of this from its position of strategic patience, have any incentive whatsoever to see this situation resolved before it has maximally shifted the regional balance in Beijing's favor? Tell me in the comments which path you think Washington actually chooses. Tell me whether you think the mainstream coverage you have been consuming gives you any of this context. Tell me what angle you believe is being most systematically underreported as this story develops. We will keep tracking every development in this region, the air defense integration, the diplomatic back channels, the carrier group repositioning, because that is what this analysis exists to do every single day. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with everyone in your network who is trying to understand what is actually happening in the skies over the Middle East, because the official narrative is not going to tell them. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update. The situation is moving faster than the headlines, and we will see you in the next analysis.